The wine glass shattered across the marble floor like a bomb exploding. My mother's scream cut through the dining room as red liquid splashed everywhere. "You adopted someone else's mistake," she shrieked, her face turning purple with rage. I stood frozen, clutching my daughter's car seat so tight my hands hurt. The entire Holloway family sat around the table, staring at me like I'd just committed a crime. My father's face turned dark red. He pointed at the door with a shaking hand. "Get out," he growled, his voice cold and dangerous. My sister leaned toward her husband and whispered something, and they both looked at me with disgust. The silence that followed was worse than any yelling. I looked down at Lila, my 3-month-old daughter, sleeping peacefully in her car seat, completely unaware that her entire world was falling apart. "She's not a mistake," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "She's my daughter." My father stood up slowly, and everyone went completely silent. When he finally spoke, his words hit like a physical blow. "Then you're no daughter of mine." Those words echoed in my head as I walked toward the door. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody said goodbye. I stepped out into the cold December night, holding a car seat in one hand and my entire future crumbling in the other. Let me take you back to who I was before that terrible night. My name is Grace Holloway, and I grew up in one of the wealthiest families in the city. Our house wasn't just big. It was massive, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and paintings that cost more than most people's homes. My parents weren't just rich. They were the kind of rich where your last name mattered more than your character. Growing up as a Holloway meant everything had to be perfect. Perfect grades, perfect clothes, perfect smile, perfect everything. My mother used to say, "Our reputation is our most valuable asset." I believed her. I wore designer clothes to school when other kids wore jeans. I learned to play piano and violin not because I loved music, but because that's what Holloway children did. There were 3 of us kids. My older brother, David, was groomed to take over the family business. My sister, Margaret, married a lawyer exactly like my parents wanted. And then there was me, Grace, the golden child who did everything right. I got straight A's, went to an Ivy League school, and earned a law degree. My parents were so proud they bragged about me at country club dinners. I was 25 years old, and I had never truly made a decision for myself. I was a puppet wearing expensive clothes, and I didn't even realize it. The real me, the person who actually wanted to help people and make a real difference, was buried so deep I had almost forgotten she existed. The day everything changed was a Tuesday in September. I was volunteering at St. Catherine's Hospital like I did every week. My parents thought it was good for our image. They didn't know I actually loved it. I loved talking to patients and helping them feel less scared. I loved doing something that actually mattered. That afternoon, a police officer brought in a newborn baby. She was so tiny, probably just a few hours old. Her skin was pale, and she was wrapped in a worn hospital blanket. The officer explained that someone had left her at the hospital entrance in a cardboard box with a note that just said, "Please take care of her." I couldn't stop thinking about that baby. All week, I kept coming back to the hospital just to see her. She didn't have a name. She didn't have a family. She was completely alone in the world, just like I had always felt inside, even though I had everything material a person could want. 6 months later, I began the adoption process. I did it quietly, telling my family I was taking on extra foster care duties. It wasn't exactly a lie. I just wasn't telling them the whole truth. When the adoption was finally approved, I named her Lila. Felt right. Lila meant night in some languages, and she had come to me in my darkest time. For 6 months, I raised Lila in my apartment while my family remained completely clueless. I fed her bottles between work shifts. I changed diapers while wearing the expensive clothes my mother expected. I played her lullabies late at night and felt more joy than I had in my entire privileged life. But secrets never stay buried. My sister Margaret discovered the adoption papers when she was snooping through my apartment. She wasn't even supposed to be there. She had let herself in with the spare key she'd stolen years ago. Instead of calling me, she immediately texted our family group chat with a photo of the papers and a simple message: "Grace has lost her mind." My parents called an emergency family dinner. I thought they wanted to celebrate with me. I was so incredibly naive. When I arrived, I found my entire family sitting around the dinner table. My brother David was there with his wife. Margaret sat next to her husband, Thomas. My parents sat at opposite ends like they were judging a court case. Even my ex-boyfriend Jordan was there. Why was my ex-boyfriend at my family dinner? I should have known something was very wrong. My mother didn't even wait for me to sit down. She called me emotionally unstable and unfit to be a mother. My father said I had betrayed the family's values. Margaret recorded everything on her phone while her husband smirked at me. The criticism came fast and hard, like arrows flying at my heart. Then my father made his announcement. He was cutting me off financially and removing me from his will immediately. He said my decisions had shamed this family beyond repair. His final words were the ones that destroyed me. "You're no daughter of mine." I stood up, still holding Lila's car seat, and walked out without saying a word. Nobody followed me. Nobody tried to stop me. The woman I used to be, the obedient, perfect daughter, had just walked out of her family's life forever. That first night in the motel room was the hardest night of my life. The room was terrible. The heater didn't work, so I was freezing. There was no crib, so I kept Lila's car seat next to the bed and wrapped her in a hospital blanket I'd kept from her first day at St. Catherine's. The walls were thin, and I could hear other people's lives happening around me. Arguments, crying, televisions blaring. I sat on the edge of the bed holding Lila while she slept, and I cried. I cried for everything I had lost. I cried for the childhood that taught me my own worth depended on perfection. I cried because I was terrified I had made the biggest mistake of my life. What if my parents were right? What if I couldn't take care of a baby alone? What if I failed her? But then I looked at Lila's small face, peaceful and trusting, and something shifted inside me. She had been abandoned by her biological mother. She had been left in a cardboard box. Yet here she was, sleeping safely because I had chosen to keep her. In that moment I realized something my entire upbringing had tried to hide. Real love isn't about perfection or image or money. It's about showing up for someone even when it costs you everything. I whispered to her as she slept, making a promise I intended to keep forever. I will never let you feel unwanted like they made me feel. I don't know how, but I'm going to give you the life you deserve. The next morning I started figuring out how to survive. My friend Sandra, a nurse I'd met at the hospital, became my lifeline. When I told her I was homeless and desperate, she didn't hesitate for a second. She said I could sleep on her couch for as long as I needed. That couch became my safe harbor. Sandra helped me find night shifts at St. Catherine's Hospital. The pay was barely anything, but it was something. I would work from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., sleeping in the hospital staff lounge during my breaks while Lila slept in a portable crib someone donated to me. During the day, I would watch Lila and figure out how to make our life work. I felt invisible at the hospital, which was actually a relief. Nobody knew I came from money. Nobody knew my family name meant anything. I was just another desperate woman trying to keep her head above water. I felt free for the first time in my entire life, even though I was exhausted and poor and terrified. The other staff members treated me kindly, but I could see some of them pitying me. I was the young woman working nights with a baby, clearly struggling. Some people offered me hand-me-down clothes and baby supplies. One janitor named Carlos used to save me leftover food from the hospital cafeteria, which helped stretch my tiny budget further. Sandra would watch Lila while I worked, refusing any payment. "Family helps family," she would say when I tried to insist. "And you're family to me now." For the first time, I understood what real family actually was. It wasn't about money or image or reputation. It was about people showing up for each other when things were difficult. 3 weeks after I moved out, a certified letter arrived at Sandra's apartment. My hand shook as I opened it. It was from my father's lawyer. Inside was a formal document stating that I had been officially removed from my father's will. The letter was professional and cold, designed to hurt as much as possible. The last paragraph read, "Your decisions have shamed this family beyond repair. You are no longer welcome at Holloway family gatherings, events, or properties. All financial support has been terminated effective immediately." I read those words over and over until they blurred together. I had known it was coming, but seeing it in writing made it somehow more real. I walked to the kitchen sink and watched myself burn the letter. I held it in the flame until the paper turned black and crumbled into ashes. I watched those ashes swirl down the drain, and I felt something release inside my chest. That letter was supposed to destroy me. Instead, it freed me. I no longer had to wonder what would happen if I disappointed them. The worst had already happened. I had been cast out by my own family, and I was still alive. I was still standing. I was still moving forward. It's just you and me now, Lila, I told my sleeping daughter. And that's enough. Back at the hospital, the rumors about me started spreading like wildfire. My sister's husband Thomas worked on the hospital board, and he made sure everyone knew my story. But he told it differently. According to him, I had stolen a baby to get attention. I had used charity volunteering to find a vulnerable child to exploit. People whispered when I walked past them in the halls. One afternoon, my supervisor called me into his office. My stomach dropped. I thought I was being fired. Dr. Patel was an older man with kind eyes and a quiet way of speaking. He sat down across from me and said, "Grace, I know what people are saying about you." I felt tears coming, but I tried to stay strong. "I adopted my daughter legally," I said quietly. "Everything was done through the proper channels." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "I know. I looked into it. The story that's being told around here isn't the true story." He paused and looked directly at me. "Don't quit. You're stronger than they are. This hospital needs people like you. People who actually care about patients instead of just caring about gossip." His words saved me. There were days when I seriously considered just giving up, finding a different hospital, leaving this place where I felt judged. But Dr. Patel's belief in me kept me going. He became a mentor and a friend when I had almost nobody else. Years passed. Lila turned 5 years old, and she had grown into the most beautiful, joyful child I had ever seen. She had dark curly hair and bright brown eyes that lit up when she smiled. She was creative and funny and kind. Everything I hoped she would be. One afternoon, she drew a picture at school. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands. One was tall me, and one was small her. We were standing on green grass under a blue sky with a big yellow sun. When I asked what the picture was, she said, "That's you and me. That's our family." I taped that picture to the refrigerator, and it made me cry every single time I looked at it. While my original family had rejected me, Lila saw me as her entire world. I was doing something right. During those years, I started taking night classes to become a registered nurse. It was incredibly hard. I would work at the hospital, come home to Lila, wait for Sandra to go to sleep on the couch, then study at the kitchen table until 2 a.m. I was running on about 4 hours of sleep per night, but I kept pushing forward. Slowly, the world stopped laughing at me. People started seeing me differently. I was no longer the crazy girl who stole a baby. I was becoming Grace, the nurse who actually knows what she's doing. One day, I saw a wedding announcement on Facebook. My older brother David was getting married again. His first marriage to Rachel had ended years ago. I scrolled through the wedding photos and I wasn't in a single one. I hadn't been invited. My own family hadn't thought to include me. But then I saw something that made my heart stop. In one photo, there was a young woman I recognized. It was Jessica, Lila's biological mother. I found out from the comments that she had gotten sober, rebuilt her life, and was apparently part of my family's social circle now. She was 7 months pregnant. My sister Margaret had posted a photo of Jessica holding a bouquet with the caption, "Everyone deserves a second chance, except Grace, apparently." The cruelty was intentional and calculated. I closed the app and sat there for a long time, feeling something sharp and painful in my chest. Jessica had abandoned Lila at the hospital. She had left a newborn in a cardboard box. Yet she had gotten her second chance. She was celebrated for her recovery. She was invited to family events. But I, who had devoted my entire life to caring for that abandoned baby, was still seen as the family disgrace. That night, I almost gave up. Everything seemed to pile on at once. Hospital bills for Lila's asthma treatments kept coming. The rent was due and I was $20 short. My car needed repairs and I couldn't afford them. I was working 60 hours a week and barely surviving. Some nights I would sit in the darkness and wonder if I had made a terrible mistake choosing this path. One evening, Lila woke up sick. She couldn't breathe properly and I panicked. I knew it was an asthma attack, but we didn't have her rescue inhaler because I couldn't afford the refill. I held her in my arms, feeling completely helpless and terrified. I swallowed my pride and called my father. It was the first time I had called him since dinner. Dad, please, I said, my voice breaking. Lila is sick. I need help paying for her medication. Please. He listened in silence. Then he hung up without saying a word. I broke down completely. I called 911 and the paramedics came and helped Lila. They gave her oxygen and a proper inhaler and she was okay. But I sat in the emergency room thinking about how alone I really was. That night I made myself a promise. I would never ask my family for anything again. Whatever I needed, I would get it myself. Whatever Lila needed, I would provide it. We would make it on our own no matter what it took. The next morning, Sandra found me crying at the kitchen table. She listened to everything: my failure to reach my father, my fears about not being able to take care of Lila, my exhaustion from working and studying and parenting all at once. When I finished, Sandra said something simple that changed everything. Go to Dr. Patel. Tell him everything. See if he can help. Dr. Patel listened to my story in his office. He didn't offer pity or empty promises. Instead, he said, "There's a scholarship program for healthcare workers in difficult situations. The requirements are strict, but I think you qualify. Let me help you apply." 3 months later, I got the acceptance letter. Full tuition, books, and living expenses covered. It was a nursing degree program, a path to a real career that could support Lila and me. The first day of nursing school, I was terrified. I was older than most of my classmates, exhausted, and balancing everything on the edge of a knife. But Lila kept me going. When I came home stressed about exams, she would crawl into my lap and whisper, "You can do it, Mommy. You're so smart." Those words pushed me forward when everything felt impossible. 4 years later, I graduated top of my class. I had my registered nursing degree, and I had transformed my life from homeless and desperate to stable and respected. The hospital promoted me to administrator, a position that nobody ever expected I would reach. My name appeared in the local newspaper. Grace Holloway named hospital administrator at St. Catherine's. The article talked about my dedication to patient care and my unique perspective on understanding struggling patients. Reading those words, I felt like a completely different person than the girl who used to care more about her family's opinion than her own happiness. Then one afternoon my phone rang. It was a number I recognized instantly but hadn't heard from in nearly a decade. My mother. Grace. Her voice sounded older, tired. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but your father isn't well. Can we meet?" I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, neutral ground where I could leave any time I wanted. When I saw my mother, I barely recognized her. She had aged dramatically in the 9 years since I had seen her at that terrible dinner. Her face was lined with worry and she looked small somehow. She ordered tea with shaking hands. "Your father has severe heart failure," she said without preamble. "The doctors say he needs a transplant, or he'll die within a year. None of David or Margaret are matches. None of his siblings are matches." I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no sympathy. Just a strange numbness. My mother reached across the table. "Grace, we need to ask you something. Would you be willing to get tested? To see if you're a match?" The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. These people had cast me out and disowned me. They had called my daughter a mistake and a disgrace. And now they wanted something from me. They wanted me to save my father's life. "I'll do the testing," I said quietly. Not because I suddenly forgave them, but because I needed closure. I needed to see this through to whatever ending was waiting for me. The hospital ran all the tests. I waited for the results, feeling strangely calm. When Dr. Patel called me into his office, I expected him to tell me I wasn't a match. But he had strange news. "Grace, you're not a match for your father. But your daughter is. Lila's blood type and genetic markers are nearly perfect for your father's condition. She's an ideal donor." I felt the world stop spinning for a moment. Lila, the granddaughter my father had called a disgrace. The child he had rejected before she was even born. She was the only person who could save his life. I didn't tell my parents right away. Instead, I sat with Lila that evening after she came home from school. She was 18 now, preparing to start college in the fall. She was brilliant and kind and everything good that had come from my terrible childhood. I told her the entire story. How my father had suffered a heart attack. How he needed a transplant. How she was a perfect match. How my family had rejected her before she was even born. Lila listened to everything, her brown eyes serious and thoughtful. When I finished, she reached over and took my hand. "Mom," she said softly, "if I can save him, I want to. Not for him. Not for the Holloway family. For you. Because you taught me that doing the right thing even when it's hard, that's what makes us human." I held my daughter and cried. She was better than all of us combined. We met my family at St. Catherine's Hospital on a gray Thursday morning. I walked in wearing my administrator's coat, Lila beside me. My father looked terrible, pale and frail, barely the powerful man I remembered. My mother gasped when she saw Lila. She hadn't seen her since she was 3 months old. My mother's voice shook. "Who is that?" I met my mother's eyes directly. "That's the girl you called a disgrace. That's Lila." My father's heart monitor started beeping wildly at that moment. His blood pressure spiked from the shock of seeing us. Medical staff rushed in to stabilize him. In all the chaos, I could see the realization dawning on my family's faces. They finally understood what they had lost. The doctors explained that Lila would be a living donor. They could remove one of her kidneys, and she would be able to live a completely normal life with one kidney. But she had to sign consent forms and go through psychological evaluation first. When Lila went through the evaluation, the psychologist told me afterward that she had never seen someone so certain and so peaceful about her decision. Lila wasn't doing this to prove something or earn gratitude. She was doing this because she was genuinely compassionate. The operation was scheduled for the following week. I sat in the waiting room with Lila's roommate and best friend Maya. Lila was in surgery upstairs, and my father was in another operating room, preparing to receive her kidney. I thought about every cruel word my family had ever said. I thought about the wine glass shattering on marble. I thought about being disowned at 25 years old. I thought about the motel room and the uncertainty and the exhaustion of building a life from nothing. Hours passed. Finally, the surgeon appeared. "It went well," he said. "Both surgeries were successful. Your daughter is in recovery, and your father is stable. Everything went as well as we could have hoped." When I was allowed to see Lila, she was groggy but smiling. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "Did it work?" "It worked, baby. You saved his life." She squeezed my hand. "Good." My family tried to control the narrative. My mother called asking me to give a family statement to the press. My sister Margaret wanted me to post something on social media about family reconciliation. They wanted to use this moment to fix their image. Instead, I posted a simple photo of Lila in her hospital bed with a caption, "My daughter gave her kidney to my father, a man who called her a mistake before she was ever born. She did it because she's better than all of us. She did it because she has the kind of character money can't buy." The post went viral instantly. Thousands of shares, hundreds of thousands of comments. The story of the adopted child who saved her rejecting grandfather's life touched something in people. Media outlets picked it up. Local news wanted interviews. We were suddenly on the local stations and in newspapers. My family tried to capitalize on the attention, but people saw through their fake sympathy. Comments filled up social media. "This family is disgusting, and they don't deserve this young woman's compassion. And this is a beautiful girl and terrible parents." The story had captured the internet's heart, but not in the way my family wanted. The media attention lasted for weeks. Reporters wanted to know about my journey. They wanted to hear about being disowned and how I had rebuilt my life. They wanted to interview Lila about why she made such a selfless choice. Every interview, every article made my family look worse and worse. Local news ran a feature called The Holloway Family, a story of rejection and grace. They interviewed former household staff who had witnessed my family's cruelty over the years. They talked to neighbors who remembered seeing me being kicked out. They painted a picture of a family so focused on image and perfection that they had forgotten how to actually love their own child. My father recovered slowly. Lila's kidney was working perfectly in his body, keeping him alive. But instead of bringing the family together, the whole experience seemed to damage them further. My sister Margaret disappeared from social media. My brother David stopped showing up to country club events. My mother seemed to age another 5 years in just a few weeks. The weight of public judgment was crushing them in ways I never could have imagined. My father's lawyer contacted me 3 months after the surgery. He said my father wanted to restore my inheritance and formally acknowledge me in his will again. The lawyer handed me a thick envelope containing checks and legal documents. I looked at that envelope, and I felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even relief. I had spent so many years imagining what I would feel if my family finally accepted me. I thought I would feel vindicated. But the truth was I didn't need their money anymore. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I had built my own life and I was proud of it. I declined politely. I told the lawyer to keep the inheritance. I told him that I had forgiven my family, but forgiveness didn't mean welcoming them back into my life. I had spent 9 years building walls to protect myself and my daughter, and those walls would stay up. I'm free, I told the lawyer, and I'm not interested in anything that would tie me back to them. What happened next I didn't anticipate. The viral story about me and Lila had drawn scrutiny to my family's entire business empire. Journalists started digging deeper. They discovered that my father and brother had been involved in some financial improprieties for years. Nothing overtly illegal, but ethically questionable and morally wrong. Within 3 months, the family business began to collapse. Partners started pulling out. Clients left. The reputation that my family had spent generations building came crashing down in weeks. My father's health declined after that. The stress was too much for his recovering heart. My mother called me constantly, begging me to make a statement defending the family. She asked me to tell the media that my father was a good man, that the business practices were just misunderstandings. I never returned her calls. The Holloway name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, became synonymous with scandal and deception. Everything they had valued, their image, their status, their money was being stripped away piece by piece. 2 years after the surgery, I was sitting in my office at the hospital when I received word that my father had passed away. He had suffered another heart attack, and this time, his recovered body couldn't handle the strain. The transplant had given him 2 more years of life, but stress and shame had slowly broken him down. I didn't cry when I heard the news. I felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Sadness for the man he might have been, relief that a painful chapter was finally closed, and anger that things had to happen this way. My mother asked me to give a speech at his funeral. The entire city was watching to see what I would do. Would I defend him? Would I attack him? Would I finally publicly forgive the family? Instead, I didn't attend the funeral at all. Lila asked if she should go, and I told her the decision was completely up to her. She decided to visit the grave alone, place flowers and whisper, "I forgive you." That was Lila's choice, and her choice was far more powerful than anything I could have said. 5 years after my father's death, my mother's business finally went under completely. She lost everything: the mansion, the cars, the art collection, the jewelry. She moved into a small apartment and lived a quiet, anonymous life, completely the opposite of everything she had ever wanted. My brother's marriage fell apart under the weight of scandal. His wife left him and took their children. He moved out of state to escape the shame. My sister Margaret's husband was eventually charged with fraud in connection with the family business. He went to prison for 4 years. The Holloway name, once powerful and respected, became a cautionary tale about what happens when you value image over character, money over love, and perfection over authenticity. I watched all of this happen from a distance. I didn't feel vindication. I didn't feel happy about their suffering. I just felt grateful that I had escaped that world before it consumed me completely. Years later, Lila became a doctor. She specialized in transplant medicine, helping people receive life-saving organs. In a strange way, her experience giving her kidney to my father had shaped her entire career. She was using her pain to help others. One afternoon, Lila and I visited my father's grave together. It was a quiet cemetery on a hillside overlooking the city. We brought flowers, simple wildflowers, nothing fancy or pretentious like the arrangement my mother had placed there. Lila placed the flowers gently on the grave and whispered a few words I couldn't quite hear. When she turned to me, I saw tears in her eyes. "Do you think he was proud of me?" she asked softly. "I think by the end, yes," I told her honestly. "But it doesn't matter what he thought. You should be proud of yourself." She nodded and took my hand. We walked through the cemetery in silence, leaving behind all the hurt and anger and regret. Today, I sat on the porch of the house I built, overlooking a garden I planted with my own hands. Lila sits beside me, no longer my little girl but a brilliant young woman doing incredible things in the world. She rests her head on my shoulder, the same way she did when she was 5 years old and drew that picture of our family. Mom, she asks, do you ever miss them? I smile softly, thinking about the question. I think about my mother, living alone in her small apartment. I think about my brother in another state, hiding from his shame. I think about my father, who never got to see what an incredible woman his granddaughter became. No, sweetheart, I tell her. I don't miss them. They're the ones who'll spend their lives missing what love really was. Lila squeezes my hand, and we sit in silence as the sun sets over our garden. I am free. My daughter is thriving. And we built this life ourselves, without needing anyone's permission or approval or inheritance. That's the only revenge that ever mattered.